everybody, and welcome to the Wise Women podcast with myself and Wyn Abbot and with Kathy Hodges. So today we are going to talk about Rapa Nui, which many of you may know as Easter Island. And Kathy is a mine of information about this. She knows a lot more about it than I do. And a little
I'm waiting for the comments to come in.
Okay. She does. She knows a lot. But before we go any further, please subscribe if you haven't already. We've got lots of fantastic podcasts coming up. So, I mean, I don't know about any. I think everybody is familiar with the Easter Island figures, and I have to say, whenever I see them, they make the hairs on my arms tingle, that stand on end. I think they are.
Me too. Yes.
Yeah, they do. And because they're not gods, they are the ancestors. But I'm not going to say too much about it because I said Kathy is more about this. But it's a fascinating story about Rapa Nui, how it became Easter Island, and the people. So the spirituality and everything. So it's really fascinating. So, Kathy, tell us more, because you definitely know an awful lot about it.
So, yeah, thank you, Wyn. Well, mind you, saying that, you know a bit about it as well, because you studied it a few years back. So, don't sell yourself short. You're not getting away that easy. You're doing it as well. So don't wander off and make a cup of tea or anything, because we'll know. Easter Island. So, Easter Island is called Easter Island, first of all, because a Dutch gentleman, he actually discovered it, even though there were already people living there, but we won't go into that, how the colonizers like to say, we discovered it. Anyway, on an Easter Sunday, I think it was in 1722. So that's where you get the name Easter Island. And when you say Easter Island, what you think of are those incredible statues, yeah? So they are looking inwards, most of them. They're absolutely massive. And they've got these very prominent sort of brow ridges, and some of them are wearing hats. And they are just so striking and so iconic. Everybody's seen those pictures, haven't they? So you think about that. Mm. But what is Easter Island all about? Where did it start? Where did the population come from? Interestingly, they had to sail a long way to find this island. So, Polynesian islands, there's like a string of them, really. And these wonderful Polynesian people from, well, it depends which way you want to talk about it, because it's from about 300 to 800 CE is when they fell upon Rapa Nui, Easter Island. I'm going to call it Rapa Nui from now on, because that's what they called it. As far as I'm concerned, that's what it is to me, and I think it is to you as well, Wyn, isn't it?
It is, but it's funny, isn't it? If you say that to most people, they wouldn't know where you meant. You say Easter Island, and people know exactly where you mean. But yeah, it is a shame, really, that we've stuck to the Easter Island name.
Well, we also believe that you and I both believe that many of us have lost our connection to our ancestors. So one way of honouring them is to use these names. Because although these people were Polynesian, these are our joint ancestors. These are ancient peoples, yeah? So they belong to us as much as we belong to them, no matter where we are in the world. So we're going to call it Rapa Nui, yeah? So this string of Polynesian islands in the Pacific, they had these wonderful people on them. And they were just incredible navigators. They would navigate for thousands of miles, believe it or not, in their canoes. And they would navigate by the tides and the seabirds and the stars. And it was all very much moving at the right time, moving with when it felt right, and just heading for destinations. They were explorers. They were so intrepid. They were curious. They were excited by life and what they were going to find. So they set off from one of these islands. As I said, there's a bit of a difference about the date, but you get the idea. And I'm going to actually mention this guy's name, and I'm going to read his name. The reason for that is because I don't want to upset any Rapa Nui, because there are many still on the island. His name was Hoto Matua, and he was the first onto the island, so the first chief. And he brought with him, obviously, they wanted to find a lovely island. This one seemed perfect, and they brought with them things that they would need to survive. So pregnant women, men, women and children in this double canoes, they could fit everything in. And they also brought with them some plants and some seeds, etc., just to make sure they had enough to eat. Obviously they couldn't fit much in there, but they also brought chickens. And also on these canoes, whether they brought them or they hitched a ride, we're not sure, were these Polynesian rats. More about them later, because Wyn knows a lot about them. So when we talk about the deforestation later, we're gonna delve into those naughty rats. So anyway,
it was part of their diet. They
Yeah.
ate them.
they ate them.
That's what brought
And
them.
apparently they're more like in between sort of a hamster and a guinea pig. So it's not like you would think of eating a rat that you see, you know, whatever now. It's not that. It's like so it's bigger, probably chunkier and tastier. No. Anyway, they brought some of those as well. And they went on to the island. Now they established this civilization. But when they first reached the island, there would have been many trees there. Yeah, there was forestation. But by the time the first of the colonizers to get there, the Dutch guy, when he got there, hardly any trees left. Now there are lots of reasons why we think that happened. There are two main theories. The first one is ecocide, which is basically they just ravaged the trees to death and used them for all sorts of things, which I'll explain in a bit. And so it was all their fault, really, all their fault. But the other side of that is that there were many droughts in the 16th century going into the 17th century, which then would have caused famine, and also things wouldn't have grown properly. And they also, I'm sure, used the trees to move the statues, you know, so they had to keep cutting them down for that. And they made a lot of wooden carvings. I'll go into all that in a bit. But Wyn, you know a good deal about these naughty rats, don't you?
Well, there's been a number of theories over the years about the trees, because yes, they were responsible for deforestation because they were farmers, so they cleared a lot of the land, and they also used the trees because I can't remember the type of tree, but it was a very tall, very kind of round trunk, so it was perfect for using as rollers.
It's something like Sephora Tormino or something like that, isn't it? Probably my pronunciation is totally terrible, but there you go. Yeah, something like that. Tormorino or something.
So first of all, they thought that they had deforested it. It was all their own fault. Then there was also looking at the other things. Yes, so there were droughts and other, kind of ecology issues. But the rats that they brought with them, whilst they brought them for food, they also ate the fruit and the seeds and the nuts from the trees, and they weren't able to kind of replenish growth. So there was a combination. I don't think it was one particular thing. It wasn't deforestation, but that obviously did a lot of damage. So there was a combination of things. So, and I think that people still argue about, whether it was all their own fault or whatever. But I mean, it's there's usually more than one reason why things happen like this. But whatever happened, the lack of trees had a massive environmental impact on the island and on the life of the people that lived there.
Well, it breaks down the ecology. I mean, it is like, the Amazon rainforests and everything, that all the house building that goes on all over the world now, and loads of these areas being cleared, and that's where we're losing wildlife, that would perhaps had other wildlife there that lived in the trees. We don't know. And there are lots of islands around that area that are very lush, you know, so it doesn't make any sense that would be the only one that didn't. So there definitely was some there, but like you say, the reason why it all disappeared is up for debate.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, when I was at uni, I studied invasive species. So you only need to look at the introduction of frogs in Australia and the devastation it caused.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, boats that go from country to country and they have mussels and sea creatures attached to them, that they take them to another environment, and it has an effect on the ecology of the other island. And that was the same with the rats. So the rats were then taken into a new environment, that they're out of their own environment. So all those things, whether they are accidental or deliberate, have a massive effect on the environmental area, the environments and the ecology of the area. So, you know, I mean, that's definitely been seen to have had some impact on it.
Yeah. So
yeah.
you know, this is the practical stuff that we're talking about. These are the kind of things that happen. But these kind of practical things that happened then affected the spiritual beliefs, which is like the bit that we're both really interested in, apart from the history of the Rapa Nui themselves. So when they first arrived, they believed in something called Manu. So this was across the Polynesian islands. It wasn't just these guys that turned up on Rapa Nui. So Manu it's kind of the life energy that gives, it's the life spirit. It's the divine energy that lives within things and then gives it life. So the earth, the land, the sea, the animals, and ourselves. So if you think about that, that divine spirit energy, that is something that many cultures have believed and do believe, and that is basically, I think it's the soul. Yeah, for me, it's the soul, or what fills the soul with inspiration and life and hope and all that divine sovereign energy that gives us our unique abilities and our connection with everything. You know, that's what it's all about. So these massive structures, these big heads, they believed that they were infused with this spiritual energy, this Manu, because they were recreations in volcanic ash. That's what they made it from, in this specific place, the massive quarry which they made them in, of their ancestors, and priests and members of the community that were very highly thought of. So people they would look up to when they died, and they're all facing in. And what occurs to me is that surely most of the trees would have gone by the time most of these were finished off, if you know what I mean. So perhaps the reason they're looking in is because they realise that things are getting quite difficult. And so when things start to shift, I think a lot of civilizations think that if they ask for help from whatever gods they believe in, then perhaps they can stop that destruction in its tracks. But like a lot of civilizations, what they sometimes do is make it worse, because to make these big statues, these heads on Easter Island, they had to actually cut down trees to get them there, because they use string and they use some logs and things like that, because they'd walk them. And where the quarry is to where these statues are, and there's about 1,000 of these statues on the island, and the island's only 14 miles by 7. So you can imagine that's a lot of statues in a small situation. Then they have to walk them to these places. That's why they call them the walking statues or something like that. And they've been called that all the way through.
Yeah, they're massive, aren't they? Because they would slide on rollers down the hill.
Yeah.
Then they would get them up. They are huge, because whilst you see the heads, there's full bodies underneath, isn't there, of many? Then they would walk them. I mean, I can't imagine how they managed to do it, because there are a number that are broken that didn't actually make it. So there's only a few that are facing out to sea. Most of them are looking, protecting the village, aren't they? So I wanted to ask you, you might not know this.
Hope I do.
Okay, but so some of them were deliberately pushed over. Yes.
Yeah. So once the trees had gone, this is what is thought. Once the trees had gone, and once they were having trouble surviving because they'd had these droughts, etc., and the rats had been eating everything, and they were getting into a bit of a state, they kind of gave up on that particular belief with these statues protecting them, because obviously they weren't. In the end, you get quite annoyed. They used to get annoyed with gods. People get annoyed with their gods these days, and they thought, well, you're not protecting us, so they toppled them. And apparently that's a lot of the reason why. And that is when they started believing in the Birdman cult. Right. Yeah. So Maki was their god. Yeah, their major sort of fertility god, the creator god, all that sort of stuff. And they brought him with them when they settled on the island, did the Rapa Nui. But but he was kind of a god. He was quite important, but he became majorly important as part of this Birdman cult. So there were birds called terns, sooty terns, and they lived and live still, I think, on a little island. That's a bit of a way. It's a tiny little island, but that's where they lay their eggs. That's where they breed. That's where they have their nests, a little way from Rapa Nui. And every year they would gather together their major warriors, their strongest men from each group, or whichever you want to call it, a tribe or a clan. There were several of them on the island. And a lot of them, actually, they were separated by those who held a lot of Manu. So this Manu came down through the generations. So from the first man, the first chief, and I'm not going to do the Rapa Nui disservice of trying to pronounce his name again, when he first came, so his son, and then his son and his son. But Manu could also be earned. So if you had somebody who became a priest, because they all have to start somewhere, there's the first of everything, or became very skilled at a certain craft, or perhaps was a seer or a healer, then they held the Manu as well. So these particular people that held a lot of Manu, these priests, these craftsmen, these really well thought of people, they were usually the ones that were the heads of these clans. And they gather these warriors together, and then they would decide which was the best one from each clan, and they'd send them off, and they swim to the other island. And the first one to bring the egg back, the first egg back, he was like the god. He was a living god for a year. And that stopped so much, they think, clan infighting or tribe infighting, because that tribe's warrior had won. And so they would make most of the major decisions about the island for that next year, that tribe would. And he had certain things he had to do, like he couldn't contact people for about 6 months or something like that, could only eat certain things. But he was also worshipped, so he became a deity in his own right. And there are lots of petroglyphs. So petroglyphs are drawings on stone, a bit like cave drawings of Maki. And those are very phallic, some of them that I've looked at. And also a lot of them to do with the Birdman cult. So a lot of birds and images to do with that cult. Because I think what they were trying to do, they were trying to sort of get Maki on their side. Because, this is my own opinion, it makes sense to me, because the statues weren't protecting them anymore, were they?
Right, okay. Do you know what is interesting about the fact that Maki is this bird feature, Birdman? It's because there are so many ancient gods and goddesses that we've got the bird goddess, the bird woman, and we've got Quetzalcoatl. So there's so many of them have got this bird aspect. I think it's about relating to the heavens as well as the earth, and then the egg is about the unknown. But it's fascinating how often it comes up from different cultures that are so far away from each other. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We could do a whole new podcast just on bird culture.
On bird cultures, yeah. That might be a bit too niche, maybe. Who knows? One day, we'll add that to the list, Wyn. Yeah, so I think that was part of it. But we're talking about this Manu, and that was still I think probably still now, if you look at I've been looking at their dances and tribal dances and stuff, this Manu, this spiritual energy is still very much revered. But the opposite of that was tapu, and that was, you could call it superstitions, but there were certain things that were so sacred, that were sacredly believed, that you should not do. For example, children's heads apparently were very sacred and very sensitive and worshipped. So there were only certain people that could touch children's heads in a certain way. And because of the rituals of birth and death and all that sort of thing, you know, that we've always had rituals of birth and death, and then the stages in between as well for men and women. We've kind of lost it in our Western culture now. But most cultures did have them until, think about the story of how long the world's been going, till relatively recently. And birth and children seem to be a big feature. And I don't know if perhaps they had a problem with the birth rate or something, not many children being born. I'm not sure if that was to do with the times of the drought and starvation, because, you know, you're not going to get pregnant if you're not menstruating. And people that don't eat very much and are going through a famine, menstruation virtually stops. So perhaps that's why children were so valued. If when a child was born, they would actually bury the umbilical cord under a stone, and it was completely forbidden as one of these beliefs, superstitions, whatever you want to call it, which was kind of part of the Manu thing, to stand anywhere near it, or something really bad would happen to you. And there were also certain areas that you weren't allowed to go to on the island, because all of these things, if you did them, would bring bad times and hardship to the tribe. So it's not a negative thing. We all have these superstitions, but I just get the feeling that they got to a stage where everything was very hard and they were doing everything they could just to keep going.
But I think that, you know, what you're talking about, so whether you see that as a superstition or a myth, I mean, with all the podcasts we've looked at, those superstitions and myths get absorbed into real life and history right the way through, don't they? So they become enmeshed. You know, you can't kind of separate them out also. You know, it's like today we see them as superstitions, but they were very real and very
real.
Still, to a lot of cultures today, they are not seen as superstitions. There's a lot of kind of truth and ancestral memories that's kind of in all that we kind of, it's too easy to dismiss.
Yes, it is, because we think we're so clever these days, don't we? Yeah, but look at the state of us, for goodness sake. And, you know, they really were switched on as to how they saw that the earth worked. And they did, you know, work with all the seasons and everything. I mean, look at what amazing, incredible navigators they were. If you think they worked, that was with all the cycles of the earth. And I think when things started to go wrong, all those cycles were kind of going skew whiff. And obviously they didn't understand why. You know, they thought they were doing what they should be doing. They were worshipping the right gods and things were going wrong.
Yes.
But also, I mean, I think Rapa Nui and the story of it is a cycle of evolution in itself, because they went through some terrible, terrible times. So the first guy, the Dutch guy, whose name escapes me, who first discovered Easter Island, as people did in those days, from the Western world, shall we say, from Europe especially, he decided to go onto the island. Now, they brought guns with them. So obviously these people, and this is 1700s, they hadn't, these people on Rapa Nui, the Rapa Nui tribe people, they had never seen guns before. And so when they saw them, they sort of went to touch them or whatever. And apparently they started firing off. And they ended up killing about 12 of the Rapa Nui. And I think some of it happened on a ship as well. It's really sad, because the Rapa Nui then sailed out, and the Dutch thought that they were angry because they killed their people. But I'm sure they were, but they were asking, just begging for their bodies back from the ship so that they could bury them. They didn't understand what was going on. And then later you had people from Spain and France, you know, And even Captain Cook, he popped into Rapa Nui at one point. And so once they'd been discovered, people started coming more often. And then it all got really bad in the 1860s because Peruvian slave traders, they decided they'd literally just go and take as many of them as they wanted, and then they bring them back to use as slaves. And they also sent them out to different properties, colonies to be used. And they took them and they were gone for quite a long time. But then the Peruvian people, they've got to get a mention because they decided this was an inhumane thing to do. And they decided that slavery was wrong. And there were protests and all sorts of things in the late 1800s saying they should go back to Rapa Nui. And so they decided they would. But they took, I can't remember how many it was, but say 1,000 and a half, I think, of the people of Rapa Nui they took. And the ones that came back, it was like a handful of people. Because most of them had either been worked to death or they died of dysentery and smallpox and things like that. And then when they came back to Rapa Nui, obviously they brought these diseases with them. So they wiped out a load of people with smallpox because, as we know, these indigenous peoples, they had not encountered these diseases from Europe that some of us would have immunity to, and or perhaps yes, perhaps not. But you know what I mean? Some of us survived. It virtually wiped them out, but they still kept going. And then, of course, then you get the missionaries turning up, don't you? Always. And then the late 1800s, by the end of the 19th century, most of the people on the island were Catholic. But a small amount kept hold of these Rapa Nui traditions.
Thank goodness.
Spiritual beliefs. And so, even though the island was then turned into a kind of massive sheep farm, and the islanders were forced to work on the sheep farms for very little money, if anything, just to survive. Still, they survived through that. So this is a story of survival. And you know what's wonderful now? What's wonderful now is that on Rapa Nui, they are regenerating, reviving this culture. They are very proud of it. It's a tiny little island, and half of the inhabitants are now Rapa Nui. So they have grown again, and they've kind of adapted because you get a lot of tourism there as well now. Obviously, you're going to, and they still make, if they can, the wood carvings to sell, and they do the tribal dances. And the wood carvings, I meant to mention them. We'll give them a little bit of a couple of minutes now just to say what they were. So these wood carvings were made from this special tree, and neither I nor Wyn can remember exactly what it's called, so I apologise for that, but you can Google it. But I think it's called the Sephora Toramino or something like that. So many of them were cut down. Hardly any of them survived, but some do. But they aren't really used for it anymore. They would usually now use driftwood or something like that. But some of the ancient statues or the wood carvings, not exactly ancient, but a few hundred years ago, they still survive. And they look like emaciated men with their ribs showing and very sort of pointy and long and thin. And they were supposed to be, again, infused with Manu, this spiritual energy. And what they would do is they would wrap them up in like a sacred cloth when they'd been made, and they would put them in the rafters of the house. So like a good luck charm, like a talisman, like many cultures have. We often have these things, don't we? And then when there was some kind of celebration or something like that, and they would take them out and they would wear them around their necks.
Right. I mean, I did know that they'd made some wooden ones, but I didn't know that bit about putting them in the rafters and what have you. That's really interesting. But the whole thing is, it's kind of like, I mean, first of all, what trust they've put everything in the boats. You know, they don't even know where they're going, but they've put everything that they might need to live, and they're just going. I mean, that's kind of terrifying and exciting in one. And then they kind of they build a life there, and then it kind of all falls flat, and kind of So you go, it's like that ancestral pattern of birth, life, fulfillment, death, and then regeneration and rebirth, isn't it? It's kind of like that whole pattern.
Like a metaphor for
The
it.
journey of crossing the ocean, everything. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
No, I said it's like a metaphor. The whole
Yes.
story of
Yeah.
Rapa Nui is a metaphor for that. But you
Yeah.
know, what's brilliant about it is that the civilization hasn't died out.
Absolutely.
They
Yeah.
are still there, and there is a guy that's there. I don't know how many there are, but I think it's just him actually, and he actually provides the tattoos. And apparently I saw this him talking in a video. I wish I could remember his name. So if he's watching this, thank you very much. It was really interesting listening to your video about tattoos. But the lady who was interviewing him in this video that I watched, she said to him, so, you know, what are the tattoos all about? And he said, well, they are bloodline emblems, basically. So if you saw somebody walking around Rapa Nui, say 500 years ago or something, and you saw them with a certain tattoo on them, he said it was like your passport or your identity card, because the tattoos, they were actually specific to certain families and tribes.
Yeah.
And the tattoos are a bit like the petroglyphs, you know, like those rock drawings. So you've got things like lizards and birds and maki and other gods and deities, and some images, I think, of the actual Easter Island head statues as well. And so he said that if you looked at somebody and looked at their tattoos, you would know which family or clan they belong to. And he said that he's still, people that carry that bloodline on, they know which are their tattoos. And so they go to him, and then he tattoos them with that. So it's being carried on. And he said some people might come to him and say, oh, can I have something different and I'll pay you? Because apparently he does the when people come to visit, if they're coming to visit, he charges. But if they are Indigenous Rapa Nui, then he doesn't charge.
Yeah.
He said, if you want anything other than tribal, because I'm trying to keep the culture going, you've got to pay for it, mate.
Yeah, yeah, and it's all about that ancestral memories and what have you. And you know, I mean, I know we talk about it a lot, but it's so important. I mean, I've got stuff that was my grandmother's or my grandfather's, and it's absolutely precious to me because it's that link. And I think that we don't have the ancestral memory link that you know, like Rapa Nui and Indigenous tribes, and it's wonderful that they are still able to carry on with that despite all the adversity, you know, the things that have gone wrong. But yeah, and I kind of wish that we had more of that. We have our stories and things, don't we? But
yes, we do.
You know, we do have things passed down from generation to generation. But this is it's a different level, I think, when you're talking about people like the Rapa Nui and Aborigines and what. I mean, I think it's a different, and they've really held on tight to their ancestral memories and their ancestral links and the bloodline. It's so important. So
and you know, you were saying about the Easter Island heads, when you look at them and you get that feeling like the hairs stand up, it's because of our connection.
Yes, it is.
It's like, it's almost, when you see them and you get that, it's almost like an out-of-body experience. It's almost like an instinctual, you know, it's like if you're near a standing stone, you just want to touch it. You feel that resonance of ancient cultures and love and religion and spirituality that's so basic, that's so rooted within us, that has been forgotten. And that's one of our reasons for doing this podcast, isn't it? To take us back to that.
It is. Yeah, it is. Because all the energy and the passion went into every cut mark, everything, you know, all the energy that was kind of focused on that. And it's worked, you know. It's given us these incredible statues that people from all over the world recognise and are equally fascinated and drawn to.
Yeah, and I've got to give a mention to a wonderful, I think, archaeologist, and her name was Catherine Routledge, and she was the one that discovered really that they weren't just heads. I think before it had been done very well, not sensitively at all. You know, when people turned up, you know, in the 1700s, sorry. It was kind of known, but I don't think they treated it all very respectfully. But I think she did. I think, you know, she did it with the archaeological tools and beliefs of the time. But I do think that she spent a lot of time there, and she wrote a lovely book about it, a really fascinating book. And it is off its time, and it is a bit dated. But she, you know, she went behind just the statues themselves. She wanted to find out about the culture. She lived amongst the people for a long time. And it's great because when you see these heads, it draws people in. But it's like anything. What you see visually, there's such a story behind it. And that's why I, years ago, became interested in Easter Island. And just doing, you know, a bit more research for this particular episode, I found such a rich culture there and just a real survival message. You know, I think all of us, whether, you know, personally, we go through times of struggle and it's difficult, and you can come right to the edge, you know, whether it's emotionally, financially, or whatever it is, and think, oh, and then, you know, you grab hold of your Manu that you've got within you, and you get in touch with that spiritual resonance, and something makes you get back up again. You stand up like those statues, and you're saying, right, I'm going to stand tall and I'm going to do it.
Yeah. I mean, one last thing before I finish, but I mean, what you just said then about how respectfully she did, when that she kind of uncovered the statues. I think we look at a lot of the early archaeological finds, and particularly around figures of female goddesses, or even male, and particularly those that were kind of maybe naked, phallic, and whatever. They were judged on the morals of the day rather than the meaning from when they were made. Because today when we look at them, we can trace kind of much more depth into the meaning and understanding of them. But I mean, there's examples of like 18th, 19th century, even 20th century archaeologists that have found things, and they judge them on the religious morals of today, not on, you know, wonder what this meant. And
they don't want to. They don't want to. I don't think.
They're not treated as respectfully as a religious icon or something that is sacred, because a lot of them were sacred, and they were connecting people to the spirit and the gods and the goddesses, and
the cycles of life. You know, the cycles of life.
It's important that with the Rapa Nui, I don't go to Easter Island either, Rapa Nui, and any of those, that we look at them with a reverence of the time when they were made and why they were made, and the connection with spirit, because I don't think we should lose that.
No, and you know what happens when during the times of colonization and discovery and empire, some of these statues were taken from Rapa Nui, or let's call it Easter Island again, just towards the end. And to be honest, I think at the time, you know, there wasn't very much they could do about it. No. And perhaps, I don't know, perhaps it was kind of to give them some food or medicine or something. Perhaps they took it for that reason. I don't know. Yeah. But they want to repatriate them. And I believe that these statues belong to all of us. But they were put in that place for a sacred reason, which we have no right to either understand all about or question, and we definitely don't have the right to take them.
I agree with you. Yeah,
there's one in the British Museum, and the Rapa Nui desperately want it back. So British Museum, if you're listening, I think that is one of the artifacts, I'm not going to go into the rest of them, which should be repatriated back to the original culture where they first came from, where they were created, and back to their home, because times have moved on now. And we don't rule the waves. We never really did. And so everybody should have their just respect, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And that's been fascinating, Kathy. I mean, really, really good. Well done. Thank you for that.
Glad you enjoyed it. And if you have enjoyed this, please subscribe. Please subscribe. We've got several more in the, that we've already aired. We've got Dark Goddesses. We've got one about royal witches. So these were women that were all connected in one way or another by blood to Elizabeth I and were persecuted. And then we've got short history of witches. We've got so much, haven't we, Wyn?
Ellen of the Ways, yeah,
Ellen of the Ways with our wonderful guest, Louise Bloomer. She was amazing. And we have another guest coming up, don't we, Wyn? This is when we get a little bit excited. Yes. So I'm going to make sure I give you all the information about this lovely lady, and I've actually written it down because I knew when I got to the end of talking about Easter Island, because I get all excited when I get on my subject, I get a bit hyper focus going on. Everything else, other bit of information will fall out my ear. So this particular lady, her name is B. Peligan, is that right?
That's right, yes.
And she is a priestess of the Ceridwen Temple in Glastonbury. And she runs lots of courses, and she is a very interesting lady. She just blew our minds, really, because she knows so much about Ceridwen. We had a wonderful conversation with her, and it wasn't just about Ceridwen. It got into all sorts of stuff, didn't it, Wyn?
Yeah, she is absolutely fabulous. She's based in Glastonbury at the Temple of Ceridwen, and yeah, I think you'll all enjoy her talk enormously because she's
fantastic. As we know, she is a Celtic deity, but I've always known of her as a Welsh deity, but apparently she started in France or something, wasn't it? Breton, yeah, I think. Yeah. And there's a wonderful story about Ceridwen and the cauldron. If you know it already, it's still worth watching because we branch off into all sorts of different subjects, and about the cycles of life and celebration and struggle and rising and learning as we go along. So we really look forward to seeing you next time when we talk about Ceridwen with our wonderful guest, B. Peligan.
Yep.
So on that note, I think we're just going to... You're going to say the same as me then?
I was interrupting you again, sorry.
Carry on. What were you saying?
Please subscribe.
Oh, again. Please subscribe. They'll get so sick of it, they'll be going, no, I was going to subscribe, and actually you've gone on about it far too much, so now I'm just not going to, because I can. But yeah, please do. And we really enjoy your comments.
Yes.
And, the more, to be honest, the more people that subscribe, and the more people that like and enjoy our podcasts, the more YouTube will encourage us to make more of them. And we want to
listen. Yeah, we do listen. And somebody asked us about doing one on the Wheel of the Year, and we're going to do that. So if you have got something that you're interested in, let us know, because, we would love to do that. We want to produce things that you're interested in. We always produce things that we're interested in, but, talk to us, and we're very happy.
And Mary Magdalene, that was another one. Mother Mary,
Yes, we could do one on that, yes.
Perhaps we could do a double Mary one. I don't know. We're open to options, but Mary Magdalene's fascinating. Anyway, before we get carried away and start talking about that and start a whole other podcast before this one is finished, I am Kathy Hodges, and I am a natural intuitive, Reiki master, artist, and history geek, lover of myths and legends. And so I am going to say goodbye, as is my colleague and my podcast co-host. Try saying that when you've had a glass of wine, you have to take your teeth out. She is a wonderful artist. She is also a published author and all-round fantastic person. And so from both of us, goodbye for now, and we hope you've enjoyed this podcast on Easter Island. Start calling it Rapa Nui.
Yes, Rapa Nui.
Yeah. Bye-bye for now.
Bye for now. Bye.